So I thought instead of boring you to death with an endless set of mini reviews on the blog, I would try to do a video of several of the books that I've read in the International Booker Longlist. The first of these is Lost on Me by Veronica Raimo, translated by and you have to look inside the book to see the name of the translator, by Leah Janeczko or Janeczko from the Italian. This is a sort of coming of age story. It's an author remembering her dysfunctional family and having quite a wry, ironic tone. It reminds me of Nisha Dolan, her books set in Hong Kong, except that because, of course, this one is set in Italy, written by an Italian, it feels much more sort of authentic, and it's revealing of a particular culture, but also a particular family. An overprotective mother with a bit of a narcissistic complex, a father who's sort of remote but tries to protect his family by building walls, both literally and figuratively. I found the humorous tone and some of the repetitions, the jokes that are being repeated, worked quite well. Some of them perhaps didn't land quite so well, simply over the length of the novel. But perhaps I wasn't being entirely objective because a lot of these stories and anecdotes of the family and of how the author tries to use it, then the narrator tries to use it in her own writing, reminded me a little bit of my own family. So I'll just give you a flavour of both the family and the writing. Here is a little passage. Privacy was a concept my mother always fought hard against. It's no wonder that at our place there wasn't a single door that could be locked. When my brother and I talked on the phone, she would stand there right behind us, suggesting answers, a habit she hasn't lost over the years. And still today, if we happen to get a call on our cell phones in her presence, especially if it's a work call, she's more than happy to chip in her 2 cents. Ask how much they're going to pay you. Come on, please, go away. Fine, but how much are they going to pay you? No, sorry, I wasn't talking to you. Hand me the phone. I'll ask them. My second read on the International Booker Longlist was White Nights, a collection of related short stories by Urszula Honek, translated by Kate Webster. I actually like this one a lot. It's the stories of a rural community in Poland, but again, there is that mix of the specific and the universal. That reminded me a lot of The Field by Robert Seethaler, uh, about life in an Austrian village, by looking at the graveyard and having the voices from the graves speaking, or Ozebol by Marit Kapla, which is non-fiction and is about the life of the last 40 remaining villagers in a village in Sweden. So this has the various interlinked stories with recurring characters, not set in a chronological order, which actually I didn't find the lack of chronological order particularly added something to the story. I'm not sure that it wouldn't have worked for me just as well if it had been in chronological order. Urszula Honek is known as a poet in her native Poland, and I think that shows because it's a lot of the stories feel a little bit like prose poems, and they're quite compelling. Uh, it's also remarkably claustrophobic. It's a meditation on life and death, but also on getting away from the place where you were born and yet never being able to quite escape. So I'll just read you a brief passage here. What was I thinking then when there was no turning back? No one has ever asked me that, though I know everyone's thought it. Making a pact with yourself is worse than with the devil, because then there's nowhere to hide. Every corner is illuminated with bright light. Around here, people don't just disappear. It's rare someone opts for a beam and a rope. More often, it's a gradual demise. They're not consumed by sorrow in a single moment, but throughout their lives, little by little, until suddenly they have nothing to breathe, they collapse. And for a while it's, he died, pity, or sometimes not even that. Everybody goes home, waving goodbye until the next grave is dug. For me, this one is perhaps one of the most memorable and most experimental on the long list, so I hope it makes it through to the short list. Third read continues on the rural theme, but this time from Brazil. It's Crooked Plow by Itamar Vieira Jr., translated by Johnny Lawrence. And in spite of its quite naive sort of drawing on the cover and sort of pink drawing, it's anything but cozy or YA or childish. It is quite an eventful book full of mostly bad things happening to people in the rural community. They are tenured farmers, so sort of working on somebody else's land, on the great landowner's land, but allowed to keep a small portion of the uh, agricultural resources in their own gardens and keep them for themselves. But really, it's subsistence agriculture. And I think it takes place sort of from the feel of it. It's sort of timeless, but it takes place, I think, probably in the 50s or 60s of the last century. Um, it starts off with a bang, two sisters playing with a knife that they found in their grandmother's secret stash and managing to cut off their tongues, or one of them cuts off her tongue and the other one seriously damages it. And so they become very close because one has to interpret for the other. But over time, over the years, they get separated by life and circumstances, and uh, we see the life of this family and their various related cousins and so on, and neighbors over the course of the years. I was not blown over by this, probably because there was another rural novel from Brazil that I felt uh, belonged much better on the on the long list. Sorry, but it was an interesting read. It reminded me a lot of Jorge Amado, although he's mostly in the urban area. It reminded me a lot of the Romanian rural novels that were the fashion in the early part of the 20th century. Um, but it it felt slightly pedestrian. I was simply not enamored of it. Okay, the fourth read is from Venezuela. It's called Simpatia by Rodrigo Blanco Calderon, translated by Noel Hernandez Gonzalez and Daniel Hahn. Um, I wanted to like this one more than I did. It has an interesting premise. Um, so, set in Caracas, um, Ulysses Khan, who's an adopted child, an orphan, and adopted by the Khan family, his wife decides to go abroad without him. Pretty much everybody is leaving Venezuela because of the difficult economic and political situation. But he has a fairly close relationship with his father in law, who actually, when he dies, leaves the flat, his wife's flat, to him, and the um, the family mansion, um, also to him on the condition that he turns it into a shelter for abandoned dogs, because since everybody is leaving the country, they are also leaving their pets behind. And as he does so, of course, the will is contested fiercely by his ex wife and her twin brother. Um, there are all sorts of bureaucratic and other issues with setting up this foundation for rescuing dogs. Um, there are also several interesting similarities and bringing in of past history. His father-in-law was obsessed with Simon Bolivar and his family. Um, and Simon Bolivar famously had a dog. So there's a bit of a mystery that he has to unravel as well. It so as I said, the premise sounds quite interesting, and it can be read as a political allegory about a country that has gone to the dogs, but in a way, I felt it had moments that were poorly written. It didn't quite captivate me in the way I hoped it would. I found it a bit of a drudge to get through. There was some gratuitous sex scenes that were really quite badly written. Um, so I I liked certain aspects of it. I didn't love it overall.